27 years after the events of It Chapter 1, Pennywise, the demon clown, returns to torment the citizens of Derry. We were promised a faith that can move mountains, so how do they move this mountain? Welcome to Durbania, I'm Durbin, and this is my theological analysis for It Chapter 2, Destroying Fear. Spoilers ahead. Now, if you've seen the 90s movie, or you've read the novel, or you've seen this movie, spoilers ahead means absolutely nothing to you. But if you don't want spoilers, put this in your watch later list and come back. If you're ready for spoilers, let's dive in.
27 years. I dreamt of you.
27 years later, the Losers Club return to the small town of Derry, all grown up now, and join hands in a circle to perform the ritual of Chud, a battle of wills. Their will, finite human beings, against the will of a giant cosmic world-eating being. And, you know, to no surprise, the ritual of Chud failed. But why did the ritual of Chud fail? It's about belief. Is it not? I mean, even poor Eddie had his spike, and he believed it was a monster killer. He believed it, and he hurled that spike into the chest of the beast, and the beast just laughed at him and made fun of him. I mean, if we were promised faith that could move mountains, how come here was Mike trying to get them to have faith, trying to get them to believe, and this mountain, Pennywise the clown, was not only not moving, but he turned into a giant spider clown. He got even bigger, and he got even scarier. Mike lied to his friends about the ritual of Chud. When the Native Americans first performed this ritual to try to destroy Pennywise, they were killed. And Mike thought it was because they had a shadow of a doubt in the ritual. So he left out that part about these Native Americans being killed so that his friends would go into this having 100% certainty that it will work, and thus it has to work, right? Right? Wrong! They were using the ritual to band-aid over what the ritual's trying to tell them to look at. It's a contest of wills, right? Now what they gotta be doing is looking at the truth of their hearts. What are they actually believing about themselves, and what are they actually believing about Pennywise? Fear is faith. It's just faith in reverse. It's faith in something's ability to hurt you. Whereas real faith is like faith in God's ability to help you. When you go into It Chapter 1, we learn Pennywise really is quite powerless. I mean, yeah, he's a cosmic being, and yeah, he's got powers, but you see in this scene with Beverly,
I'm not afraid of you.
look at the frustration on Pennywise's face. He immediately had to course correct, and he had to find another way to make her afraid, because in that moment that she wasn't afraid, he lost his authority over her.
That's why you didn't kill Beverly. Because she wasn't afraid.
You see, not only was fear his food, fear welcomed him in and gave him authority over them. Why? Because fear is faith. It's just faith working in reverse. So when they're afraid of Pennywise and they're fearing him, they're actually having faith in him. They're having faith in his bigness. They're having faith in his ability to harm them, and thus they are opening the door and allowing him in. And in looking at his bigness, they're looking at themselves like teeny tiny grasshoppers that can't do anything against this clown. And yet, Beverly found that truth. And when she stopped being afraid of him, he lost his authority. When the kids were together at the end of It Chapter 1, they quit fearing him. And when they quit having that faith in him, when they quit giving him his food, he lost his ability to harm them.
Now you're the one who's afraid.
But they didn't go that extra step and destroy him, and 27 years later, he's able to return. Now, when you go into the Bible, the people of Israel encountered something very similar. Now, they had just been delivered from Egypt, and they were slaves there for 400 years, and now Moses shows up, and God does these amazing signs and wonders. So they get delivered out of Egypt without having to raise a weapon against their captors. They get to the Red Sea, they think it's a dead end, and then God splits the sea. They cross on dry land, and then the water crushes their enemies, and thus they are delivered. You would think in that moment their faith would be in God, and they would realize there is nothing bigger or greater than him. But in Numbers 13, they find themselves on the cusp of the promised land. They send spies into the land, and then they utterly freak out. Well, not all the spies. 2 still have faith, but the others absolutely freak out and spread this bad report. We saw the Nephilim there. So they're looking into the promised land, they spied it out, and there were the Nephilim. Now that's a fascinating subject to study all by itself. But other translations say giants. There were giants in this land. We seem like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. I think the key is we look like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we look the same to them. Man, when you see how God delivered them out of Egypt, what you see is those giants had no authority over the Israelites. God said, this is your promised land. If they had just taken God at his word and entered the promised land and prepared themselves to fight, they were going to conquer and wipe out those freaking Nephilim beasts because God was so much bigger than what was in there. But what did they do? They had faith in these giants' ability to hurt them. They were afraid of the giants. That fear pushed out the promise and sent them into the wilderness for 40 years. That's what fear does. It makes something that's not so big look bigger than it really is. It's the devil's scheme. He has no authority to touch us or harm us, but if he could get us to fear him and fear what he could possibly do, suddenly we're having faith in him and allowing him in when really we could wipe the floor with him when we have God on our side. So the reality is Pennywise could be defeated easily by these kids. But the idea here is they need to correct the faith in their heart and turn it in a different direction. They got a preview of that at the end of the first It. This is where the It movies get really interesting to me. In It Chapter 1, the kids, the Losers Club, experience a victory because they realize Pennywise is quite powerless. He has no power over them except the power they give him through fear, through having faith in his ability to harm them. And so when they reject that fear, he no longer has his food and no longer has a place over their lives to come in and harm them. So before they had the chance to destroy him, he runs and he hides. So that way he can return 27 years later with the curse over the town that when they leave, the further away they get, the foggier things become and the more they forget the truth that had set them free so that he can maintain this stronghold over their lives.
It consumes us from the inside until we don't have a choice anymore.
So when they face him off at the end of It Chapter 2, and he's a giant clown spider, and he's really desperately trying to destroy them before they remember the truth, too late, they remember. And they realize this whole thing that he's really just this small, powerless clown. And that's what turns him into a small, powerless clown. They saw the truth of the situation. They reversed their faith back in the right direction and realized, compared to him, they weren't the grasshoppers. And in their own eyes, when they corrected that vision, Pennywise freaked out. You know, when a little spark of fear hits, it's like a little spark hitting gasoline. It ignites into a flame. And as soon as he realizes he's really lost that place in their lives, and they're there with the determination to really just take him out once and for all, that fear consumes him like a flame over gasoline, and he gets smaller and smaller, faster and faster, because he knows the truth about himself. He was just trying to blind them from it. Now they're not blind to it. Now, what we saw him go through physically is what he tries to do with every single one of his victims inside their own heart. It's what happened with the Israelites when they looked at the giants rather than at God. And so they made him believe he was small, and he got so small they were able to take out his heart and squish it. And no more Pennywise the clown. He was now defeated and destroyed because they dealt with the true heart issue. That fear is just faith. It's faith in reverse. God is bigger than any mountain that we could ever face. All mountains that we could face in our life are nothing but molehills in comparison to the power of God. Jesus said, speak to your mountains. You could tell it to be commanded and thrown into the sea, and it will obey you if you have faith. It's about where we place that faith. We can look at those molehills in our lives and give them power over us by fearing them and turning them into gigantic mountains. Or we could be mountain movers when we remember God is so much bigger than anything we could possibly face in our life. And when we take that faith and we place it in Him, nothing compares. And then that mountain begins to lose its power over our life and we can move it.
Now you're the one who's afraid. Because you're gonna starve.
So what did you think of It Chapter 2? Let's talk about that in the comments. And while you're there, hit the subscribe button to become a Durbanian. Hit the bell by the subscribe button so you're notified for my next theological analysis, movie review, ranking video, or anything else I do here. I'm Durbin. Thanks for checking out Durbania.